Hi, Atman. Good and evil. A perfect example is one of the greatest musicians of all time, Little Richard. I say the greatest because in 1986 he was honored by being one of the first 7 musicians to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1993 he was given a Lifetime Grammy Award for his achievement in music. In 2004 he was considered by Rolling Stone to be the 8th greatest artist of all time, while 6 of the first 7 who were before him on that list were heavily influenced by his music. In 2007, Little Richard's 1955 original hit, Tutti Frutti, topped Mojo's poll of the top recordings that changed the music world. Okay, a little bit on Little Richard. In 1951, he won his first talent show. In 1955, he became a real success. Then, at the top of his short, successful music career, fearing his own damnation, he brought it to an abrupt halt in 1957 to become a born-again Christian. He withdrew from his recording, claiming he was called to be an evangelist. He recorded only gospel music, claiming at the time rock and roll music was the devil and it was impossible to be a rocker and please God at the same time. A little more about Little Richard. He backslid from the ministry in 1963 and went to rock and roll to tour Europe. He had the Beatles for an opening act back then. Also that year, he toured Europe with a then unknown band called the Rolling Stones. In 1964, he brought at the time a fledgling named Jimi Hendrix into his band. Without going into detail, those were wild times. Trust me when I say no one wanted to miss one of his parties, which to this day still remains unrivaled for their wildness. In 1977, he repented again and returned to evangelism, doing only gospel music and preaching on and off stage. He was sliding back and forth. In 1980, attention was refocused on Little Richard after a release of a critically acclaimed, authorized autobiography, The Life and Times of Little Richard, in which he candidly explains his struggles and repentance with substance abuse and homosexuality. At the time, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame honored Little Richard as one of the first inductees. This resulted in a show business comeback for Little Richard. Then in 1986, Little Richard reconciled his role as a minister. He recorded an album of inspirational music. To this day, he has been one of the biggest names in show business. I said Little Richard going back and forth. Good or evil, good and evil. Okay, just nothing personal about anybody, but I got here Jimmy Swaggart, adulterous indiscretions with a prostitute. He was forced to step down from the pulpit for a year. Then in 1988, he made an apology to his congregation, asking God to cleanse him. He was caught again in 1991 with another prostitute. I could go on about many great people and others of great stature, but I think you get this part of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. For you that may be older may remember Wine, Women, and Song. Basically the same thing. Some of these people that we just mentioned have contributed a great deal to mankind. Okay, so probably they were not that bad, or were they? Do many of us lead double lives? Maybe when we are completely alone, we may think about temptations. maybe in the bridal chamber, the honeymoon suite, we tend to get a little crazy. Or maybe we just think about it. Thinking about it is the crime the same. God said this is part of the world which He created for us. No. Man and God's view of evil may be different. Okay, so what about more serious evils? Let's say murder. A very serious evil in almost any culture. We're not necessarily talking about right and wrong. A man commits murder. In some cultures, the man is put to death. Now to me, a defenseless man put to death, that is murder. Some religions say all men are sinners and only can be saved by belief in Jesus. This is the only way. Does that put a murderer in the same situation as a person who does good and does not believe in Jesus? Are they the same? What about war? Does that count as murder? Or does the end justify the means? Now the plot thickens. Okay, here we go a little heavier. The miracle of birth gets attributed to God. Okay, so if a child is stillborn, does that make God a murderer? Nature and the universe and all its magnificent glory gets attributed to God. So does that mean a man struck by lightning or killed by a flood or earthquake? Does that mean God is at fault? No, brothers and sisters. Although this and much more is a part of God's world. Good and evil is a part of God's and our world. Not a separate part or an opposite part. Alright, let me tell you something else God has told me. Seems a little out of context, yet it seemed called for at the time, I guess. It's a quote that's a little serious. Some people might not like it. But it says, "The future does not exist until we create it." Prayer. God, shine your light upon me. God, grant me the strength and fiber to remain in your light. Atman is a child of God who is known for his great insight into religion. He has a knack for teaching through quotes and short stories. He is considered to be an expert writer. He claims that God is his mentor because he dared to knock on God's door. Get a free quote a day. All men have fears. The brave put aside their fears and go forward. Sometimes to death, always to victory. GainUniqueWisdom.com. Get a free quote a day delivered straight to your inbox. Thank you.